Hi there, I've put this little presentation together to record my experience of building the special hobby Polikarpov I-16 in 1/32 scale. I hope you find it interesting and useful. Hope you don't mind if I give a little bit of historical background first. Nikolai Polikarpov had already created one legendary design before working on the I-16. His PO2 biplane of 1928 was to become one of the most produced aircraft of all time. However, entering service in 1934, the I-16 could hardly have been more different from the tractable PO2. It was the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world at that time. It was the first to combine a monoplane cantilever wing, retractable undercarriage and enclosed cockpit. It was also the first to be mass produced, with over 10,000 built by the end of 1941. The design was improved over time and it performed well in the Spanish Civil War. It was the Republican forces there that gave it the name Rata, or Rat. Unfortunately for the USSR, by the time of the German invasion in 1941, the I-16 was obsolete. The Type 24 represented a large percentage of the Soviet fighter force, and although it was the only I-16 variant that was capable of topping 300 miles an hour, it was still outclassed in virtually every respect by the Bf-109. The I-16 Type 24 is not in the present special hobby catalogue, but the Type 1017 is available and is, with the exception of very few parts, identical to the kit built here. Special hobby are essentially limited production kits, which means they may not be quite up to the standard of the latest dearer equivalent kits of the manufacturers in some ways, but this does mean they can release a wider range of subjects that no one else does. On opening the box, you find a fairly small number of plastic parts, boosted by a considerable number of resin ones, and a comprehensive brass photo etch set. The standard of moulding of the plastic components is good, with hardly any flash and no awkward sink or ejection marks. Surface detail is good, if not quite as sharp as the most modern state-of-the-art kits. The limited production nature of the kit is evident in the thick attachment points of the parts to the sprues, as you can see here. The resin parts, which replace many of the smaller plastic components supplied on the sprues, are fairly well done. There's a lot of them and they do offer an improvement over the standard kit parts. You can see here how the resin bits on the left compare to the standard kit parts on the right. I wouldn't describe the resin casting as state-of-the-art by the most modern standards, but it does the job and the parts proved easy to work with. The decal sheet gives options for 2 examples and appears to be good, though more of this later. The instruction leaflet looks good too, although 1 or 2 issues with it arose during the course of the build. All in all, not bad for an online price of just over £20. Here's a closer look at the etched brass sheet. It's well done and means you can buy this kit without needing to spend extra on any aftermarket accessories. Building starts with fitting the resin gun bays. This isn't straightforward, as the outline has to be cut through the thick fuselage moulding. The resin bays are fixed with cyanacrylic glue and then blended in with filler. The job's only necessary if the gun bay is to be displayed open. I didn't realise this at the time. The cockpit interior is a mixture of plastic, resin and photo etch parts. It looks a bit basic, but according to photographs of museum examples, it's accurate. The only problem is that the resin sidewalls need you to remove the integrally moulded detail from the fuselage halves before the resin bits are fitted. This leaves the cockpit sides looking a bit thick and heavy in my view. The resin floor is good, but it has a thick moulding plug on its base that's not easy to remove. The resin seat has a moulding plug squarely between its 4 delicate moulding legs, and it's tricky to remove this without damaging the legs themselves. I coloured the etched brass instrument panel with AK interactive burnishing fluid before the detail film was added. The cocking levers for the guns, incidentally, are fitted at the top of the panel before it's put in the fuselage. These are a real fiddle and you can leave them off because they can't be seen in the finished model anyway. I pre-shaded the cockpit components with dark grey before colouring them with Humbrol green H80, blue H65 and brown H94. After a dark grey wash, they were assembled within the fuselage half. The completed seat looks pretty good once the photo etched seat belts are attached. The cockpit appears fairly Spartan, but so it was on the real thing. Components at the ready for assembly of the fuselage. The fuselage halves fitted together well, but some extra reinforcement was required to secure the cockpit and instrument panel. I used strategically placed blobs of milliput to do this. Wing assembly is broken down into 4 outer panels and a central section under the fuselage. The centre section is attached to the fuselage first and the fit is very poor. A lot of sanding, filling and shaping is required to sort it out. More filling is required when the upper and outer wing panels were added and also at the tailplane fuselage joint. Resin ailerons and elevators are included. To fit them though, the moulded items on the kit parts need to be cut away first. The elevators fit well, but the ailerons are a problem. The resin items are shorter than the moulded on ones. If the aileron is cut off as marked on the wing, the gap is too big for the resin part and the gap has to be filled. The shorter ailerons are correct though, the moulded ones are as fitted to earlier I-16 variants. Now to the engine and cowling. The resin engine provided is a good moulding, and once the resin push rods and etched plug leads are added, the finished item looks fine. The I-16 cowling was fitted with cooling shutters at the front rather than the more usual cooling gills. These are represented in etched metal and fit well inside the resin cowling front. Two cowlings are provided in the kit. One injection moulded and the other in resin. Neither of them fit. The plastic one's too wide at the point of join with the front of the fuselage. The better detailed resin one is too narrow. A way round this is to combine the two parts. The back 2 mm of the plastic item was mated with a suitably shortened resin front. The join was carefully blended, then the completed unit was attached to the fuselage. It was easier to blend in the oversized plastic rear than it would have been to build up the undersized resin one, and the final result looked okay. A lot of work is needed to get to the stage you see here, as both the cowling and particularly the wing fuselage joint needs so much filling and sanding to look satisfactory. As you can see from the photo, the tailplane fuselage joint still needed work at this stage. The I-16 had a complex undercarriage and the kit represents it well, but it's not easy to put together. The location points are not very precise, so I replaced the locating pins on the legs with lengths of superglued brass rod. To get the resin doors placed accurately, the assembled legs were supported in a small vise. The final stages of the build are quite straightforward. A few etched brass panels are included for the wings and fuselage, which all fitted well. And as for the painting, I started with an overall coat of Halford's grey plastic primer. Then 2 alclad aluminium panels were added at the wing roots to help with weathering later on. Some pre-shading of panel lines was done in dark grey. The final colours came from the Vallejo Soviet Air Force Great Patriotic War Set, Article 71198. The underside was sprayed with AMT7 greyish blue, the upper surface with A24 AV71303 camouflage green. The paints went on well, with good coverage and a nice eggshell finish. An overall coat of a 50-50 mix of clear and water was applied to seal the finish. Weathering was mostly done with Flory Models weathering washes. The undercarriage and undersurfaces generally were highlighted with brown. A fine brush was used to run the wash over the fine detail areas and into the panel lines, and then lightly streaked and smeared with a damp cotton swab. The upper surfaces received similar treatment, but this time with the grime wash. The exhaust stubs were prepared and painted, but I didn't fit them until the painting of the whole model was done. The bottom twin stubs don't remotely fit, so I replaced them with lengths of plastic tube. The wing guns are a bit crude, but you can use the ends of the resin fuselage guns that were provided for the gun bays. I found the kit decals very thin and they broke easily. The tail code numbers disintegrated altogether, requiring alternatives to be sourced from the spares sheet. The red stars are all painted on, using Montex masks. Vallejo's 71003 red RLM23 provides a good colour match. The panels at the wing roots were scratched with a cocktail stick to reveal the alclad underneath, and exhaust stains were sprayed on before fixing the exhaust stubs in place. A small amount of scratching was applied to edges of some of the metal panels with a silver pencil before applying a final coat of well-thinned varnish of a 50-50 mix of Humbrol matte coat and gloss coat. The canopy is a bit thick but fits well after some gentle sanding. It was left off until the main paint job was done. The gun sight was a problem though. It's a very nice resin brass assembly that looks very good, but is actually unlike anything ever fitted to a Type 24. Fortunately, after a bit of research, a much more accurate version can be built from it. Well, whilst this wasn't an easy kit to build, hence the title of the show, it has its strengths. The completed model benefits from the resin and etched parts not provided in either Hasegawa or the Revell ICM kits. The Hasegawa kit's not widely available in the UK and is expensive. The ICM Revell kit is good, but without the resin and photo etch package found in this one, and so it's less detailed in some areas. So, credit to Special Hobby for a worthy product. Won't be long before another one of their kits appears on my workbench. Hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for listening.